as I said, I'm Eleanor Beal. I work at Manchester Metropolitan University in Contemporary Literature and Film. And I've also been part of the committee, University English Committee, and part of the English Creates campaign now for a few years. And I've had pretty much the absolute joy of working with several students over sort of 3 years of the campaign. If you look at our website, you'll see we now have obviously this fantastic new AI blog from Reading University students. But we also have a number of kind of advocacy statements. We've had students do videos talking about a graduation video for us, doing various kind of social media campaigns and creating resources and collaborating with us across the breadth of the campaign for the last few years. So it is my delight to kind of introduce 4 more students who have been kind of onboarded and who are here to kind of talk about their experience of doing the literature degree. So I'll be chairing this afternoon's panel on studying English now. It's a panel discussion from 4 students from different backgrounds and institutions, speaking about their past and current experience of taking the English degree and their kind of thoughts on the value and the future of English literature. So our students the general structure will respond to, I've got about 5 or 6 questions. And of course we have, I think Catherine's moderating the chat as well. So please do feel free to pop in any questions that you have, any comments that you have, any shared experiences of doing the English degree, as many of us will have done, or of teaching it. Please do pop those into the chat and we will try and make about 15 minutes at the end to share those questions with the 4 panelists today. So I'm going to ask them each to introduce themselves, say their name, what institution they're from, and what degree they are currently coming to the end of as well. So if I start with Harry, if that's okay.
Yep, hiya. So I'm Harry. I've just finished my final year as an undergraduate student of English literature at the University of Glasgow.
Thank you. Gina?
Hi, I'm Gina. I just finished my final year studying English Lit at Liverpool John Moores.
Mara?
Hello, my name's Mara. I've also just finished my final year at the University of Manchester studying English literature as well.
And Eleanor.
Hi, I'm Eleanor. I've also just finished my final year studying English literature at Durham University.
Brilliant, thank you. Yeah, we've met a few times over the last sort of couple of weeks, haven't we, sort of talking about your experiences of doing the subject and maybe some of the worries you might have about sort of going forward in the English degree, but certainly I think some of our conversation has been based on some of the kind of reservations that people had. And it was really interesting for me to listen to the fact that some of the same kind of myths and ideas around the English subject were still being perpetuated sort of 20 years after I've done my degree. I wondered, for my first question, I wanted to start really though with asking you, why did you choose to do English and what kind of excites you about the subject? If I could ask Mara first.
I chose English because I've always been drawn to reading books, as I feel most of us have, but also I've kind of always been quite fascinated with the idea of not only learning about different perspectives, but kind of coming as close as we can to inhabiting those different kind of experiences and kind of inhibiting and like that sort of a different consciousness that's not our own.
Fantastic. It's interesting you mentioned there about kind of reading, because then that's kind of popped up a little bit on particularly the previous social media channel. What was your kind of experience of reading on the English literature degree? Was it something that you found, like, was there too many texts? Was there not enough text? Do you find your friends read or don't read?
I found it really expansive. I kind of went into the degree expecting it to be all quite archaic and similar, and there has been such a variety of different texts, different, not just books, but plays and, all sorts of different things. And it's really made me feel more confident in tackling things that I wouldn't have originally thought were my thing. And there were certain modules that were, like far too much reading, in my opinion. Like, you know, a 700-page book a week, you know, with 3 other modules, it was too much. But there are some that, like, you know, we'd spend one text 3 weeks, and that was, you know, my favorite thing, because you got to really explore the intricacies of it and not feel so rushed. But yeah, it was great. The variety, I loved it.
That's really interesting. So I think that's something we've been talking a little bit more at my university, is spending more time on a text. Gina, I wonder if I could ask you the same question. Why did you choose to study English? What's kind of interested you and excited you about the subject?
So I originally decided to choose English for a degree, because I kind of didn't know what degree I wanted to do. I was really interested in history, fine art, theatre. So really for me, English was just kind of a way of being able to combine all of those things and still being able to take those interests into a single degree. And I think with the subject being so diverse and kind of allowing you to really go for modules and for like theories and stuff that is really kind of what you're interested in, you can really tailor it to kind of your own interest areas.
Okay, that's really interesting to hear that the choice is something that I think we work quite a lot on trying to provide these days for students. I think some of the comments from the other panelists have been about, you know, diversity of texts, but also I think kind of the contemporariness of texts. It's quite hard to get students to kind of connect with things that are, you know, from the 18th century or 17th century, for instance. Eleanor, how was your experience? You know, why did you come to study English?
I think for like a similar reason to Gina, that I have a very like broad set of interests, including like theatre, history, music, generally like the humanities. And I was really looking for something that would be in which I would be able to like combine a lot of these interests, but also something that's very like politically and like culturally relevant. And I think English is so it's a very, very political subject to take. You are so involved with like both the politics of the past and like the context in which like texts were produced, and also like linking that past to the present and like the future of um both literature and like reading in general. And I think I chose literature because it was so it felt very like meaningful and very involved in the current like political climate.
That's really interesting. I think, did you, I mean, I'll ask this to Eleanor, but I guess maybe something about, did you know that kind of like, has it surprised you to hear that literature is in trouble based on the ways that you're kind of talking about it and its kind of relationship to politics? And obviously, we live in such a political climate at the moment where I think from, you know, even sort of like when I was younger, or even like a teenager or doing my degree, I don't think I was bombarded with politics quite as much. It wasn't as visible and out there, and I wasn't asked to engage with it as much as I think you guys probably are today. So do you think it's quite surprising that people don't see that within literature?
I think so. I think because people see literature and like by extension reading as being very sort of like static and like closeted, and it's just like you sitting like in an armchair with a book just reading. I think people see it as a very like static sort of like yeah, like a not very um proactive or like active degree. But I think definitely like at the start of taking an English literature degree versus now being about to graduate, you definitely sort of I think you become more like politically aware generally through taking a degree like this, and then you also become more aware of literature as being something that is very like politically aware by nature. It's no longer just like I'm reading for fun, but I'm reading for fun, and there's a lot of like things that I have to like that I bear in mind when I'm reading now. I feel like I read a lot more like aware of different things. I'm not just reading because I'm enjoying it. I'm reading because there's more of a purpose to it, I guess.
Yeah, that's interesting. Especially as well, and I guess maybe there's something how you might want to one I'd like to ask you as well why you went to study English, but I wondered whether, like, when we talk about like myths and things like this, one of the things that I often get was it like, oh, I don't like analysing novels. It ruins it for me. Or if I know too much about something, it will, can't it just stay entertainment? And I would never want to do a literature degree. I wondered if, Harry, you could tell us a little bit more about why you came to study it and if you came across any of those kind of like, myths or reservations around it.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, I studied literature. Well, I chose to study it at university because I really loved it, like doing it in school, in like secondary school. And I was really lucky to have teachers that encouraged me to stick with it and that kind of told me that this was something I could keep doing, and that it would be worth doing as well. Kind of part of that myth busting element. I think there are a lot of people who really do try and recruit you in a sort of way because these myths are so pervasive that I think a lot of people switch off from the idea of studying literature at like university because of them. And I think that idea of like analyzing novels ruining it is really funny because you do encounter that, and I think people feel literature and that level of analysis can make people feel quite uncomfortable sometimes. I think it links back into sort of the politics of literature as a subject as well. I think some people are not very comfortable having, objects of our culture examined so closely for kind of what they reveal about us and the society that we live in, because once you begin to question why things are written in a certain way, then you kind of have to do something about it afterwards. And I think a lot of people are simply not willing to do that. And that's why it kind of ruins a book to learn that there's actually something quite important that it's saying about our world. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I never quite thought about it. It causes you to question other things if you question texts. How about you, Mara? Did you come across any kind of, resistance to you doing the degree through maybe like your parents or, I mean, I know I've seen sort of say like on TikTok and things, some kind of like almost anti-English literature degree videos up, which is quite interesting to come across. How about yourself?
Yeah, so I've both my parents were in quite like STEM related fields, and studied in relatively STEM related fields. And when I was discussing picking it, they were not unsupportive, but they weren't exactly ecstatic. And they sort of were regurgitating this sort of the useless degree myth, that it's a kind of a luxury to be able to just like kind of just read and it's a bit of fun. And now that I've finished it, like their opinions really have changed because of the sort of opportunities that, I mean, I'm sure we'll discuss it later on, but the opportunities that come with the critical thinking and the skills that you learn through it. And like reading, close reading specifically is in the attention economy that our society is currently in, where sustained close reading is becoming quite increasingly countercultural. It's what we're doing is, I do believe, really invaluable. And to be able to think really, really, take an argument apart really in such a deep way and think through very complex ideas and create our own arguments, I just think is like, if anything, becoming the complete opposite of useless. And it's nice that through getting through my degree, people's opinions have changed around me.
That's good to hear too. Actually, there's a resonant effect from you doing your English degree that actually like, you're kind of influencing people's ideas around what literature is around you. How about yourself, Gina? Did you kind of come up with any sort of friction around you doing your studies?
Yeah, so not so much with family. My mum studied English at uni, so she was very supportive, really wanted me to go on and study it. But it was more with sixth form in general. I went to a very small sixth form, there's only 5 of us that took English. So it was very much pushing towards studying STEM or going and studying law or politics and not just going for English or history or studying the arts. And I'm honestly just glad that I didn't listen to sixth form in that sense, because I found it to be completely different. I think as well, like talking to peers about it before starting a degree, and then basically just thinking that studying English was very much just, oh, you read Shakespeare, or you read like pre-17th century. That's kind of the generalization. And then actually talking to friends who are at different unis studying STEM or studying music or whatever they're studying, it's like we'll have these conversations, and actually they'll realize that studying English isn't just about those things. It does actually open like a much wider sort of sense of what you can do with it. Also being able to get a job after uni, like jobs that I've done more recently or currently in, like it has helped having an English degree and being able to take the experience in, and friends also seeing that and realizing that if they want to go and do sort of a degree in music and art, it's not actually like restricting them in any sense. It is just a propaganda that is being pushed, I think.
That's really interesting. So, like your experience again, like a little bit like sort of Mara said, that your experience after you've done it is almost like you are evidence in a way of the virtues of the English degree. I think we kind of previously had that a little bit in one of our previous conversations, didn't we? Saying that you could probably pop English students like yourselves into any room with any person and you'd be able to engage in a conversation. Like you'd be able to kind of find something to converse about, which is also like a real sort of skill, I think, out in the world. Okay, I just wanted to move on to another question that I wanted to ask you then. Did you bring with yourselves any assumptions to the English literature degree, and was there anything about studying English that sort of really surprised you? And I'll start with Eleanor for that one.
I think I'm not sure if there's any specific assumptions that I brought with me that I can recall, but there's definitely things that surprised me. Mostly about how much literature is involved with other subjects and other disciplines. Like I've taken a couple of modules in my final year that have been very closely intertwined with things like psychology. So like cognitive literary studies, and things that are like coming out like the transformative like humanities, like digital humanities, and ways in which like literature is involved with different areas that might seem very like almost like opposite to it, sort of like computer science and literature working together, or like psychology and other STEM subjects being used to enhance like literary analysis, and just how involved literature is with STEM, ironically, or like it might seem very ironic that literature is so related to STEM. And that how much we can use literature in STEM subjects to like sort of like amplifying how we understand psychology through using text where different say different like mental illnesses are represented. Like how can that like augment our understanding of mental illness? And that's definitely something that really surprised me, is that it's not just studying different periods of literary history or literature from different countries, but how much you study literature in contexts that might seem like completely other to it.
Yeah, that's really, really interesting actually. It made me think actually of the fact that there's such a thing as narrative therapies, that this is from some 70s, that actually psychologists and therapists and stuff have been learning about literature in order to kind of for people to be able to story their lives, and things like this as well. So that's really interesting. And Mara, how about you? Did you bring any kind of assumptions or things? And was there anything that surprised you about the degree?
I think this probably would have been obvious to maybe more people, but to me, I was really surprised by how, I mean, we've already mentioned it, but by how inherently political everything is that we consume and that we read, even if it doesn't appear to be that way on the surface. I'd done, a module that was pretty like a lot to do with kind of geography, and like nature, and then I did another one that was all about kind of diseases in the 17th century, and you know, from a very medical point of view. And everything like became so political, and just asking, I guess, like the depth to which we interrogate texts surprised me a lot, because obviously, I mean, we do it, but to the extent at which we do it, like, really did surprise me. And you know, to then not only ask like what we're consuming, but who's writing it and who's the audience, like it's something that I've also been surprised with how fun it is, and how kind of genuinely interesting it is to do that, and not just like read a text, but you know, really ask all these questions behind it, and interrogate it in ways that I don't think I would have with many other disciplines or subjects.
Yeah, that's really interesting as well. Harry, did you have a thought about something that was sort of surprising for you?
Yeah, I think the sort of misconception that I had maybe about an English degree like when I was a teenager, I think I had this idea of like studying literature as you do everything from like the earliest written text to like contemporary writing. And I was honestly quite glad that that was sort of disproved. You really get to become a specialist in the areas that you enjoy studying. You get to choose what you kind of want to focus on, because you can't possibly, well, maybe some people can, I'm not sure. I don't think I can become a specialist on every single piece of writing that's ever been written. And I don't think that should be the goal either. I think you get the opportunity to delve really deeply into these really specific areas or kind of time periods, and then you get to interact with this sort of wonderful network of people who've maybe chosen to specialize in other things, and you sort of learn through these interactions and collaborations as well. I think it comes back to what everyone else has been talking about as well, the sort of interdisciplinary nature of the degree. I think part of what surprised me as well is how collaborative it is. You kind of imagine a literature degree as locking yourself in a room until you've finished an essay, completely alone. And I think that's not been the case for me at all. I've gotten to talk to so many people, like talk through all of my ideas, and you know, workshop things collaboratively, even with people from like outside of my degree as well. And that's been really exciting, I think.
That's really interesting to hear about the collaborative aspect. I suppose we don't really amplify that as much as maybe we should about the English degree. We always talk about critical reading and writing skills, but actually it's a very talky subject. We're constantly talking about, you know, the books, the literature, the politics, the themes, and maybe that's something that we don't really sort of advocate for in terms of the degree. So that's really interesting. How about you, Gina?
Yeah, I had pretty much the same assumptions as Harry going into it. I really thought it was going to be all pre-17th century. I was going to have to understand Old English. I was going to have to understand all these things, because that's what I was kind of like been told that that's what would be on the course. And actually having the chance to look at a lot more contemporary texts, doing modules where we look at films, look at publishing, life writing, journals, like chamber music. It's stuff that I didn't think would be involved in an English degree. And they've probably been the aspects that I probably enjoyed the most, is having those modules that don't just focus on sort of the stereotypical canonical texts that are really pushed, or like the idea of them is pushed when you're in school and in sixth form. I think that's pretty much been kind of what's really excited me and surprised me with sort of an English degree.
That's really interesting. And I guess maybe I'll maybe return to this sort of like question later, actually. Moving on, it's interesting to like think about how students are set up for the English degree. Like what, you know, what advice were you given? What pictures were you given? What images were you given? Not just by, as I said, sort of, you know, your parents and maybe your friends and writers, but also by the schools that you attend, about what the English degree is going to be going forward. Because it does seem to be sometimes a sense that at A level, that there is this preparation for a degree that doesn't really necessarily exist in the modern university anymore. But that's given me lots of things to think about there. I wanted to move on though for a second, because I wanted to think about what's kind of changed for you. How do you feel like you've kind of evolved over the kind of course of your degree? You're coming to the end of it now. It's always a bit nerve-wracking. And what kind of skills you think have shaped you in your English degree? So if I start again with Eleanor, if that's okay.
I think I've generally become a much more like I know how to articulate myself better. I've become much more confident in like bouncing ideas off people. I've learned like what we were discussing earlier about English being a very like talkative subject, that you can't really sort of shy away from talking about it. I think in my first year I was definitely much more reserved in tutorials and seminars. I was much less like assertive and a lot more unsure about whether I wanted to speak and about whether I wanted to, is my opinion about this text the correct one? Like, is this like, I don't want to like offend anyone, or I don't want to, make anyone else's point seem like redundant. Like, I want to be able to say something that's very well thought out. And sort of just like understanding that like there is no one correct answer about the text, and as long as you try and articulate yourself well, and have respect for your own point of view and respect for the other opinions in the room, then like there's really nowhere that you can go wrong. I think being a lot more confident in myself and what I think about the text has definitely improved over the 3 years.
That's interesting. I think the first year is just the worst year in terms of like the confidence to kind of talk. But you raised some issues there that I've not necessarily thought about, I think, which is really interesting, that you make assumptions about why students in the first year don't find it easy to talk to texts. And you've actually raised up a couple of things about like, feeling not just that you might say the wrong thing, but that you might somehow diminish someone else's response, which is really interesting. Mara, do you have any kind of anything to add about like how you feel you've evolved over your degree?
I really agree with Eleanor about the confidence thing. Like, I just feel like I've gotten a lot more kind of able at holding a position in an argument without necessarily like closing down on complexity, and like really acknowledging what complicates the argument, but not letting it sort of diminish my own views. And kind of, I feel like I've become a lot more headstrong in what I genuinely believe because of it. But I do think, again, building on like what you were saying about the first year scariness of it all, and like anxiety around kind of how to participate, especially in like group things. For me, I feel like a lot of it was that most of the modules that I took, they were all mandatory pretty much in the first year. I mean, I think there might have been 1 or 2, but because of that, I felt like, because there wasn't much choice in what I could study, it didn't really feel so personal to me necessarily, and it didn't really feel like it was something I was genuinely kind of part of in a way, although it's like really important that everyone starts on the same page. And now I'm really grateful to have done those mandatory modules, because I never would have picked them otherwise. It did make me feel quite a bit of like, oh, I'm not like, am I going to have more choice in second and third year, which of course you do. And I think that's what helps as well, kind of create that accumulation of confidence as you like, as Harry was saying, like you're able to really choose to specialize in something, or you're able to choose to study 6 completely different modules in your final year that have no apparent correlation to each other. And I just feel like those skills are able to be really, really built and worked on throughout the degree, as you kind of are given more control over what you study and consume, I think.
It's really interesting. Yeah, I like to. I do speak to sort of students sort of later on, and especially during that kind of third year, there seems to be sort of the students who sort of like, oh, I love this, and this is my thing, and then they're sort of like, oh no, it's third year, we get to, I'm just going to choose, whatever, a kind of melting pot of kind of subjects, and I think that's sort of like interesting, like people's kind of different approaches to their kind of final year and what they want to learn, whether they want to specialise or whether they want to kind of experience as much as possible from the literature degree before they leave. Harry, how about you? How do you feel like you've evolved in terms of skills or experiences?
I think definitely I agree what everyone has said so far about it being a very confidence building degree. I think that for me, not only have I become more confident in just my kind of, I guess, literary abilities, my analysis, my writing, my ability to communicate an idea to someone else, but I think literature as a degree has sort of turned me into a person who is able to sort of move through the world very confidently. It's not only restricted to the literary sphere, but I feel like it has equipped me with skills that make me able to handle anything that is thrown at me by, I guess, the very scary world that we have just graduated into. And I do think an English degree equips you with skills for life and not just for literature as well. So yeah.
Yeah, that's really interesting about, sort of almost like a little survival pack of literature for how to get through the world in the modern day, which is quite scary, I think. How about you, Gina?
Yeah, I agree with everyone on the confidence aspect. I think I found it actually to help with my confidence with outside of uni and with kind of understanding how social media is used and literature, like not necessarily in a sense of looking at text, but looking at news articles and looking at what is being posted as propaganda. I think it's made me much more of a active, sort of be part of an active audience. Sorry.
Oh, that's all right, Gina.
Going.
We can all see and hear you, by the way, if that's what you're worried about.
Yeah, no, sorry, my phone's gone off. Yeah, so being part of an active audience and actually having that sort of ability to read something that is posted on, say, Instagram or TikTok and actually go, I don't agree with that because the wording of it isn't correct, and it is worded in a sense that is to make you feel a certain way or look at it a certain way, and actually just having the confidence to look at things that are being posted either via broadcasting sites or just via social media, and actually looking at it and having opinions on that, not just on text in general, I think.
That's a really interesting point, I think, about maybe like it sounds like the ability to kind of be more perceptive of other kind of text, and it's a brilliant segue, in fact, to that kind of other question, which I think links up with some of the other panels that we've been sort of discussing today, which is that kind of the hot topics of the time, in terms of what I guess the extra stuff we feel we need to talk to students about, and the extra ways that you engage with the world, which is kind of AI and employability, which are the sort of two catchwords, I guess. So I wondered if I could ask you what your kind of current thinking is about AI, employability, the job market, maybe your worries, or also about how you think the literature degree might cross over or correspond with those subjects as well. I'll do it backwards, so I'll go to Harry this time, if that's okay.
Yeah, I think it all kind of melts together in that we've been talking a lot about the misconceptions that people have about doing a literature degree. Sort of before you go, people question why you would ever kind of do that, and that those misconceptions don't disappear in the duration of your degree. And by the time you graduate, the sort of job market that you're graduating into is one that is being run by people who wholeheartedly believe all of these misconceptions about our degree and perhaps don't see the value in it. And that can feel a little disheartening and a little bit scary, because you're put in a position automatically where you're kind of on the defensive, or not only like an applicant, but you're also an advocate. I think graduating with a literature degree, you have to, and you've developed the skills to do this as part of the degree, but you do have to convince people of the value of it just to get your foot in the door, which is a kind of frustrating thing to have to do, because I think all of us understand already, having done one, how valuable a literature degree is and the skills that it has given us. I think with AI as well, it's quite similar in that I think for me, over the course of my degree, the usage of AI has increased, and like kind of the prevalence of it in sort of people's everyday lives and in conversation has increased massively. And I think the biggest thing that I could maybe take away from my degree is that we learn the skills that people use AI to kind of simulate for themselves. And so in a sense, it feels sort of incongruous that it seems so clearly that we are so skilled that people have to use this sort of technological tool to emulate what we do, and yet no one sees that. So it's, again, you come back to having to be an advocate for yourself and all of that.
Yeah, that's really interesting that we're kind of creating things to do what we can already do because we are so skilled. It's like an interesting kind of point, I think. Mara, would you like to talk to one of those subjects or both about employability and AI?
Yeah, sure. I think quite a bit of maybe not anxiety, but apprehension about the future, as I feel maybe a lot of us do. But I do quite strongly kind of believe that with the way that like the world's going right now with AI in not only like creative fields, but in kind of journalistic fields, marketing, I do think people are, I mean, I read quite a lot about it on the news, and there is quite a lot of discourse around kind of the how unappealing it is that there is no kind of sense of, there's no like I don't know how to describe it, consideration towards kind of ambiguity or subtext or tone, which is what we, as Harry was saying, quite literally study and sort of specialize in. And though I think like there is obviously a threat to like English and other disciplines, in a way I do think like I hope optimistically people will sort of realize that if anything, English is becoming a lot more necessary because of it. You know, as people start to maybe realize that ambiguity and kind of having different ideas and perspectives, and that not everything has to be straightforward all the time and agreeable.
Or
We will
delved
hope.
into.
Yeah, no, absolutely, yeah.
We have to delve into everything.
No, exactly. I think it will hopefully get a little easier for us, and I think that, you know, with employability and kind of this useless degree myth that like does unfortunately circulate a fair bit around our degree. I just think it's important with that to sort of consider like what people even mean when they say it's useless, or in contrast what useful means. And I think that does tie quite a lot into AI, in the sense that like there's an assumption behind the sort of criticism that education should produce a sort of narrow vocational readiness, as opposed to something expansive that can always be changing and shifting. And I just, though I'm worried, I do think that there will be hopefully a time when people are like, oh, this is actually really necessary and important. So yeah, fingers crossed.
Yeah. How about you, Eleanor?
Yeah, I really agree with what Mara said. Firstly about the ambiguity. I think there's one big thing that we should be thinking about right now, I think, is like what skills do we have that AI cannot like replicate, and sort of learning how to utilize those to the best of our ability. And one of the big ones I think is with like linguistic nuance, really understanding how the significance of how things are worded and how things are articulated, especially in the news and in careers such as marketing as well. And that's a huge one, of like understanding who you're writing for and what you're trying to say and who you're trying to like persuade. And I think like AI as well tends to perpetuate whatever biases the programmers or it is like become essentially aware of. And I think that's definitely a big thing as English literature students who have a big awareness of how important like the wording is, and how for example, for like people might completely misunderstand something, or like something that somebody has said, or something that someone was arguing just based on how it's like articulated. And I ultimately, I think I am quite optimistic about the future, with people understanding how important English literature and how important the humanities are for not only, I think, to pursue careers in things like the creative industries or things like academia, because I think people often like assume that, oh, you're going to do an English literature degree, you must be going into academia. People often assume that's the only path that you can take. But because of this like ability to understand linguistic nuance and this ability to really argue not only what you believe, but be able to advocate for other people and for and to present like ideas and like very well, I think like especially in employability, English lit will becoming like hopefully increasingly useful. I'm trying to be it's difficult to be both optimistic and pragmatic about it at the same time. But yeah,
I'm not sure.
fingers
I'm not
crossed.
sure it is. I'm not sure. That's my best combination. I believe is sort of optimism
Yeah.
and pragmatism. I think is probably
Yeah.
the best kind of way forward. And I thought it was really interesting that you said that, it's to think about sometimes what the AI can't do, that a human can do. And of course, you brought up biases as well. So I guess like being able to like also analyze your own unconscious biases, which we all have. So it's not just its ability to be able to pick up on other texts or be fed things. That ability that humans have to kind of change the way they think about things, as well. How about you, Gina? Did you want to talk to either one or both of the subjects of AI and employability?
Yeah, with AI, like I agree with what Eleanor was saying. Like, it is one of those things where you do have to remain optimistic with kind of how AI is looking. I think personally, I see AI as just another trend, and I think that it's going to be used so much, especially used like everyday life, and it becomes used to a point where actually it becomes quite boring. And that's how I like really hope that students look at AI, that actually they get bored of that, they're not learning anything, not seeing anything. There's no change. It's just this thing that is writing for them. So with that, I do really hope that it kind of just fades and people start actually being more positive and really trying to push sort of actually sitting and writing and just doing like an actual essay, because it is, once you start doing it, you do feel the impact of actually having written that and having had the experience to do it, and it actually allows you to do a lot more. I think the only worry with it really is that it is being pushed in different job sectors. I think the worry that actually people, it isn't just students using AI, it's going into job roles and them asking for AI to be used, and just using it for easier usage. And I think it's because people don't have this awareness of what AI actually is, and there's no sort of education on how to use AI correctly, which I think is why it's so scary when you are studying a humanities and you're just seeing people using AI all the time and saying that your degree and your interests aren't relevant because AI can also do them, which I completely disagree with anyway.
I think you're right there that it's kind of good to know like what AI is good at as well as what its kind of flaws are. I wondering, like, Tina, do you feel like you can pick up now on AI language, because it's used so much now in things like book reviews, Amazon reviews. I've seen hotels respond to people, each of their messages in a kind of AI, and people seem to be getting more aware of what an AI language sounds like. Do you feel like you could identify it more now?
Yeah, I think that it's becoming more apparent when someone is using AI, especially with it being posted. For me, like, I don't really look at a lot of things other than Instagram is like my main source of social media, and it's so apparent on there when AI is being used on captions, on descriptions. And I think a lot of people as well are actually picking up on it. It's not just I've studied English and I can recognise the language. It's actually a lot of people in comment sections now on social media are also picking up and saying that it's frustrating and that it does sound robotic, and it hasn't got any sense of emotional intellect into it. There's no sense of personal understanding.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm sort of think I can sort of read it quite often now. Mara, did you want to say something?
No, yeah, I just wanted to build on that kind of idea of if you can tell if something is AI. And I agree with Georgina, sorry, that like a lot of what is on social media is, very carelessly kind of just generated. So I think to us it is quite easy to tell. But there are some things that I think even like I would never be able to tell. And I have a friend who is studying English literature at Oxford, and she is like so anti-AI, like one of the, she's, as I think a lot of us are, but like will never ever has never used it for anything even trivial. And she's kind of got plagiarized for using it when she's never used it before, and she had to appeal, and she won it. But I was just, it replicates how we choose to write, how we write as people who study how to write well, and make really good arguments. And I think that's one of the dangers of it, is we're also starting to, if something's too good or if something's really polished and really refined, we immediately assume that it can't be done by humans in a way, or it goes the other way around, where if something's really rushed and kind of surface level, again, it's also assumed to be. And I think that's where like I'm quite hesitant to just say I know, because I think, if even professors don't necessarily can't detect it, it's like that's what's quite nerve-wracking, I think.
It's interesting because it's like we're talking about it's actually hyper detectable and actually really hard to detect, or mistakes can be made, because I think we often sort of talk about how especially sort of as students at say like sort of first year level and stuff like this do talk generally and descriptively and derivatively, and some of those things are what an AI can do, so being able to differentiate can sometimes be difficult, but also because of the sort of the massification of social media, the fact that it feeds off of the internet, but so do we. And so sometimes it's easy to kind of you learn some of your reading and writing off of the internet in some way, so you sort of absorb the styles. So 10 years ago you might find that people wrote in a slightly different style as they did sort of 30 or 40 or 50 years ago, and we can see this in literary texts all the time. People did write in different styles. So some of it is sort of that, blog style writing, or, all this type of thing, which is legitimately human writing, but it's also something an AI can mimic or do, and that we've absorbed as well. I wanted to actually we've got a few interesting questions pop up. We've only got about sort of 10 minutes or so. So I don't know, Catherine, if you could pick a few themes or things in the chat box to ask the girls.
Yeah, we'll do. I was going to start by Carol Madden's comment, which has got a lot of responses, and just say what amazing ambassadors for our discipline the panelists are. And I think we'll all wholeheartedly agree with that. Very, very impressive. And full of fascinating ideas for us to follow up on. I'll start with Lucy Burns' question about writing, because we've talked an awful lot about reading today. We haven't talked we've talked a lot about talking. We haven't talked quite so much about writing. And Lucy asks if any of the panelists had taken creative writing modules as part of their degree programmes, and if so, what myths and challenges or surprises and benefits they've encountered. I'll add a sort of supplementary aspect to that, which is if you haven't taken a creative writing module, what sort of writing skills or what elements of the degree in terms of your writing and your written communication have sort of opened different avenues and surprises for you?
Feel free to jump on that question as well. It's from the chat. If only one of you wants to answer that one.
I'd be happy to answer that. So at the Uni of Manchester in I believe it's third year, there's like a module focused entirely on creative writing. But it's, in order to get on that, you needed to do one in second year that was sort of adjacent, that I wasn't aware of. I'm sure they made us aware, but I was kind of not super sure. And then in third year, I attempted to apply, and they were sort of like, you should have been doing this. And so that, to me, kind of hindered my ability to do it. But then what's amazing is they were able to offer other modules that were kind of indirectly quite creative. Like, I did one that was all about on a playwriting and screenwriting, not only for like theatre but for film, and that was really amazing. And I think it was great because it allowed me to sort of borrow techniques that I'd learned from reading and test them in my own writing, kind of allowing me to strengthen kind of craft awareness. But at the same time, I did find it really hard and daunting, especially because there was that application process for the main module, which I'm not sure if other universities did. And I understand why they did it, but it just made it quite a bit daunting for me personally.
Does anybody else have experience with the creative writing or any other things that I can't remember, Catherine, exactly. It was like a 3-level question, that one. So I can't remember everything that was included. But did any of you guys sort of study creative writing? No, that's so unusual these days. Like, that's curious.
Is there anything about the actual writing which you produced during your degree that, the amounts of writing you had to produce, or the different styles you had to write in, did that surprise you in any way?
I have, I guess, something to say about sort of the quantity and style. I really enjoyed the sort of breadth of different assignment types that we got to do throughout a degree, and it kind of comes back to the creative writing as well, depending on what you consider to be creative writing. But I remember so vividly having to produce a 12-minute podcast episode for one of my final assignments, and we were allowed to get as creative with that as we wanted. So I sort of wrote myself a little script for kind of a fictionalized account of Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. And that was a really enjoyable experience, and getting to approach literature from a more creative standpoint, I think, is really valuable. I also think, in terms of the amount of work that we were expected to produce, I never particularly struggled with it or thought that it was too much or anything like that. And we've been consulted this year on the university is considering shortening the dissertation word limit from about 12,000 as the upper limit to 8,500, which I think does a real disservice to the students, because you don't get the same amount of depth or engagement with a lower word count. And while maybe it placates people who complain about the workload, and this is what I think, is that you're more likely to get complaints about the workload than you are to get responses that say, like, it's fine. So I don't know, I guess bravely standing up for a longer word count, which might get me stoned or publicly executed, I'm not sure.
I've had a few responses similar where they cut ours down, actually. And I think the argument our university was that most academic articles and things are 6,000 to 8,000 words, but as we said, they need to learn to write long before they can learn to write short, was our argument for that one. So is there any other questions, Catherine?
Yes, we've got lots. So I know that we're fairly short on time now, so I'll try and get as many in. So Kathy Watson has asked about, having listened to the people who are studying now, it seems you could say that GCSE and A-level is more traditional and more canonical than the subject at degree level. And Kathy brings in the fact that maybe that's because it incorporates ideas from English language A-level. But I just wondered what you thought about in terms of that move from A-level and GCSE into degree level study, and whether you thought it was more it was less traditional and canonical once you got to study your degrees. I think in your presentations you sort of intimated that, but yeah, if anybody would like to say something else about that, that would be great.
Eleanor, I think you mentioned something about that, didn't you?
can't remember what I mentioned actually. I was going to say something else. I think it also, like, sometimes it can work in the opposite way, that you get to university and it becomes more traditional slash canonical. I think there's a real range of what an English degree looks like at different universities. I know from going to Durham, it was it was quite traditional, but it was very, very much like working a lot in a lot of key literary periods that for me is exactly what I wanted in my undergraduate degree. Versus looking at I went to an open day and applied for Leeds, which I think it had some really, really interesting modules on like the body in English literature, which I think might seem less like down the traditional, less down the sort of like chronological route, which is what I took at least in like definitely my first year at Durham. But I think as well, like, it's not always that GCSE and A level becomes more like is more traditional than the subject at degree level, but it's more like you're getting like glimpses of what different literary traditions are. So like you get like a glimpse at Shakespeare, you do a couple of Shakespeare plays, but then you might do an entire module on Shakespeare at university. And like you'd learn that Shakespeare isn't just about it's not just tragedy and comedy. There's all of these problem plays. There's all of these different nuances to Shakespeare, like who really was Shakespeare. And you definitely just delve a lot deeper into what you might have just got like a little bit of a sense of at GCSE and A level. But yeah, I think it really depends on what university you're looking at and what sort of English degree you want to take. Because I think there's so many different avenues you could go down, even in your first year at undergrad.
That's great, thank you. Yeah, really sort of showcasing sort of the different aspects that you can take once you do your degree and the array of options. I think I'm going to jump to a question that's come up twice. We're all intrigued about where you're going to go next. I think, yeah, you've spoken so powerfully and persuasively that we want to be able to follow you and your oncoming sort of successful career. So I think, yeah, we've had two or three people ask, what are your plans now? The ones of you that have graduated or about to graduate. Who's going to jump in first?
Do you want me to pick you this time and go round? Harry, I think you've just unmuted.
Yeah, I'm planning on doing my master's in English literature in October. I got accepted earlier in the year to do my sort of dissertation at the University of Cambridge. I'll be doing it in sort of trans studies in early modern literature, which I'm really excited about. So fantastic. That's where I'll be.
Look forward to reading you later. How about you, Mara?
I'm currently applying for quite a few different internships and grad jobs in the field of journalism, which I'm really excited for.
Fantastic, especially for interest in politics. I think it will really suit
you.
How about you, Gina?
So I'm planning on doing masters next year in English literature, staying at John Moores.
Fantastic as well. I love the fact that you want to carry it on a little longer. And you, Eleanor?
I'm planning to do my master's either in English literature or medieval studies at York or Leeds, and hoping to go into marketing, but marketing for arts and culture and the creative industries.
Fantastic. Yeah, it's a really good career path, I feel, for you.
Fantastic. Ellie, do you think we've got time for one more quick question?
I think we've got time for, if people don't mind. I think maybe we've got time for a quick one.
It's
quick fire.
This is our question. This is a question from Stephen Watkins, and I'm going to paraphrase the question really, and just talk about. We'll ask you all, what do you think? How do you think we might best promote some of those aspects of the degree that you've all talked about today, particularly those ideas about English being about a discussion of intellectual curiosity, the desire for collaboration and collaborative techniques in sort of exploring literature, and engagement, particularly political engagement, that you talked about, Mara. So yeah, any advice to us in when we're sort of carrying on this advocacy and talking about our subject, please?
I think firstly, sort of like showing that the skills that are involved with taking an English literature degree, or English literature in general, like the skills and interests and like habits even at the heart of it are ones that people like unconsciously have anyway. I think not just like, oh, I enjoy reading, I should take an English literature degree, but that if you enjoy communicating with other people, you enjoy discussing, you enjoy debating different points of view and different arguments, you enjoy learning about history and drama and culture and people in general, that I think that like showing people that what they're already interested in can have like a home in an English literature degree. It doesn't have to be in something like, you know, their interests can be translated into a degree, and I think often that could possibly for them be an English literature degree.
I also just wanted to build on, I also think, as well as that being like such an attraction to different interests, and you know, like if anyone likes arguing or debating, it's great. If anyone likes analyzing, it's great. I also think there needs to be maybe more of a push and an emphasis on the variety of different texts and fields that we work with, rather than just sort of like the skills, but also kind of like, if you're literally interested in virtually anything, like I think English is amazing for like, because you're able, like as we've spoken about, you're able to really specialize on one specific thing. And I just think like it needs to be, because you know, the question that we were speaking about, that like A level was a lot more canonical and it made the degree seem a lot more traditional than it actually ended up being. I think that is a misconception that should be tackled in order to attract maybe more people in the future to not only pick it, but also believe that they can get employed at the end of it and find something they really enjoy, I think.
Thank you. What excellent answers. That's wonderful. Yeah, I've got a lot to go on that I've scribbled down. So thank you. Thanks very much.
I think that's you for the fun questions now, and only 3 minutes over, which for me is a win. Thanks ever so much, guys. It's been a real pleasure and an honour, I think, to have worked with you over the last couple of weeks while we put this panel together. You've given us loads of things to think about, lots of insights. You've articulated things that makes me think I should probably go back and do my degree, in fact, because you said things so well. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone. That was wonderful. Thanks to our panelists. Timely reminder that our students are so often our greatest advocates and bring through the sorts of messages and ideas that we will carry forward from today. Thank you, Ellie, as well, for chairing that panel. So we're going to have a short break. We'll reconvene at 2:15, so 10 minutes time, after which we're going to have a panel on English alumni working in the news media, which follows on really nicely from some of those last questions to our previous panel. And after that, there is, last but not least, the keynote talk, in which I'm going to be in conversation with Professor Elika Boma. So all of that to come. And thank you, everyone, so far for your wonderful contributions in the chat and questions and so on. See you soon.